"We don't accept this, grandson," my dad said after skipping Rayyan's first birthday. I snapped. "Then don't ever ask me for money, bills, or help again." So, I shut off their heat, took back the SUV, and froze every dollar they had. I used to be the kind of person who stayed quiet and always handed over money whenever my parents asked. If they said hurtful things to me, I let it slide. If they disrespected Zoya, my wife, I would later defend them with excuses like, "They didn't mean it," or "That's just how they act." If they ever needed cash for things like rent, fixing the car, or made-up problems, I gave it without asking questions. I had done this for a long time. It felt like something I had to do, even though I couldn't explain why. It was a twisted version of loyalty, shaped by years of guilt and emotional control when I was growing up. My dad's way of raising me involved shaming me until I gave in. He called it teaching me how to be a man. My mom wasn't any better. She just stayed quiet while it happened. After I married Zoya, their dislike turned nastier. They didn't hide the way they looked down on her. She wasn't from a fancy background. She didn't go to college. She worked in a store. And somehow to them, that made her less worthy. I spent years trying to make peace between them. I'd take Zoya to family dinners, even though I knew she'd leave feeling crushed. I ignored the rude things they said behind her back, even the ones they accidentally said in front of her. I told myself I was just trying to keep everyone calm, but honestly, I was just scared to speak up. Zoya never told me to pick between her and them, but I saw the way she looked at me after every visit, like she was wondering whether she was marrying a real man or just a grown boy still begging for his parents' approval. Everything changed when our son Rayyan was born. That very first night in the hospital, holding him in my arms, I felt something snap into place. It was like suddenly seeing clearly. He was the one person I couldn't fail. Not the way my parents failed me, and not the way I'd let down Zoya. Over the next few months, I started making changes. I stopped picking up the phone if I didn't want to talk. I quit sending money whenever they hinted they needed something. I started putting Zoya and Rayyan before anyone else. Not out of anger, but because it was the right thing to do. Then came Rayyan's first birthday. We kept it small, just a cookout in the backyard, some neighbors, Zoya's mom and dad, and a few close friends. I invited my parents out of habit more than anything. I didn't think they'd show. A few days later, my dad called. He didn't waste time. He said they wouldn't be coming. He said, "Honestly, we don't need this. We don't accept this, grandson." That was it. No feelings, no explanation. I didn't argue. I didn't ask anything. I said, "All right, but don't ask me for help anymore. No money, no bills, no problems." He paused, then laughed like it was all a joke, like I'd come crawling back the next time they used guilt. He had no idea that I had already made up my mind. And 2 days later, I made sure that choice showed up in their mailbox like a wrapped gift. The truth is, they weren't just skipping a birthday party. They were about to lose way more than some cake and decoration. The envelope I left wasn't thick, but what it held mattered. It had a letter, not angry, not dramatic, just clear and final. I wrote down everything they had taken from me over the years. Every dollar I had sent, every loan I never asked back, every time I stayed silent while they put me down. At the bottom was a total of $95,000. That's how much it all added up to. I also included a spreadsheet organized by date with colors and bank record details. It was a full report of the years I spent being their safety net, shown clearly on paper. I wasn't asking for any of it back. That wasn't the point. I just wanted them to understand the cost. Not just in money, but what it cost me to stay quiet all those years. But that wasn't even the biggest shock. A few weeks before that birthday party, I finally did something I should have done a long time ago. I legally separated myself from them. I took their names off all my emergency contact forms, took back the legal rights they didn't even realize they still had, updated the will that had once kindly included them. and changed the ownership of our home so it belonged only to Zoya. I also switched the person who would get my life insurance. Every single financial or legal tie connecting us, I cut it off completely. But I had one final thing planned. Inside the envelope, I placed one more note. I had hired a lawyer, not a fancy one, just a local attorney who dealt with family matters in small cases, to send them a legal warning. From that moment on, they weren't allowed to talk to me, to Zoya, or to our son, Rayyan. No direct calls, no messages through friends or other relatives. That was the end. I thought I'd hear nothing for a bit. Maybe a few angry voicemails. But 3 days later, I got a call from my sister. I hadn't really stayed in touch with her. She had always been in and out of our lives, like she couldn't make up her mind if she wanted to be around or not. I answered the call thinking she would yell at me, but instead she said, "I just received the same letter." It turned out I wasn't the only one they had been draining financially while I was pouring my money into their endless needs. They were secretly doing the same thing to her. They used her car, maxed out her credit card, and even had her co-sign a loan she never saw money from. She sounded tired, like someone who finally realized she had been sinking for years without knowing she was underwater. Then she told me something I didn't expect. "I spoke to Mom yesterday. She was crying. She said she doesn't get why you're doing this. She thinks you're blowing it out of proportion." I didn't say anything. "She really doesn't see it, Rayyan. She said she truly believes she did nothing wrong." That didn't shock me. What caught me off guard was what she said next. She told me she was cutting them off too. She said my letter opened her eyes. She and her fiancé had decided to end their relationship for good, and they were moving far away in a month. She thanked me. She said I might have helped her escape a future that looked just like mine. Then she asked if she could see Rayyan before they left. She said she wanted to really spend time with her nephew properly this time without drama, and that's when I realized something I hadn't planned. I wasn't only closing a door, I was opening a new one. 2 weeks after Rayyan's party, my dad finally responded. Not with a phone call, not with an apology. He sent an angry email. Subject line, "What is all this?" No hello, no punctuation, just 5 bitter words from a man who always pretended he was untouchable. I read it twice, then closed it. That was both the first and last message from him that I opened. I didn't reply because that email wasn't really for me. It was a way to try to stay in control. He wanted me to chase him, to break the silence, to explain my actions. But sometimes silence says more than words, especially when there's nothing left to discuss. And that's when things really started falling apart. I began getting calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in ages. Uncle Daniel, the one who once asked for cash to fix his mess after losing money gambling, left me a voicemail. He said I should fix things with my parents before it got worse. Then my cousin Alina sent Zoya a Facebook message asking if she could help change my mind. They kept showing up one after the other, all repeating the same line. "They're your parents. You only get one set." I didn't answer anyone. Not because I was mad, but because I had finally figured out what was happening. They were pulling the last strings they had left. But those strings were old, weak, and held by people who didn't even know the full story. But what crossed the line was when my mom messaged Zoya directly. It was long. It was cruel. She claimed Zoya had twisted my thinking. She said Zoya turned me into someone unrecognizable. She said Rayyan wasn't truly part of the family and never would be. She said we were selfish. She said, if we wanted to play this game, we would lose more than just relatives. She ended the message with a line I still remember clearly. "We made you, and we can unmake you." That's when I knew this wasn't just a family disagreement anymore. This was a full-on battle, and I wasn't going to fight with rage. I would fight smart. First, I contacted my lawyer. I told him to add that message to our file for harassment. We began the steps to apply for a legal restraining order. I didn't want to use it unless absolutely necessary, but I wanted to be ready. Then I went after the things they assumed I'd never touched. Through the passing years, I had been silently covering their expenses while they remained unaware of just how much authority I truly possessed. The electricity account, it was registered to me, so I shut it off. The heating service terminated. Their cell phones, I canceled the plan. The car insurance,